In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Oversoul. We're going to describe what the Oversoul is and how the Oversoul connects all of us to each other, to other individuals, and to other life forms on this planet. Alrighty, so in 1841, Ralph Waldo Emerson, he wrote an essay titled The Oversoul, where he described his belief in a shared universal spirit that connects all individuals to the divine. The Oversoul is described as this omnipresent eternal force that binds every human being together with the universe and that transcends all individual egos. It highlights how individual souls are part of a greater soul, right? That all living beings are interconnected on a spiritual level, that we are part of a whole. So if you think of God being the oversoul, then we as human beings are part of that whole. It is a mystical concept that encourages individuals to look inward and connect with the divine for spirituality and self awareness. So, as we have previously discussed in our social constructionist video, that we have mind, body, soul, that's how we're constructed, right? So, our mind is our mental substance. Then we have our bodies, that is our physical substance, our material substance. And then we have our soul, which is our metaphysical substance, or ultimately called our spirit. And that according to Genesis 2 and 7, when God breathed life into man, he became a living being. That breath of life, that life force is the soul or the spirit. And we also know that as gender nuanced people, that spirit, that animation of who you are could ultimately be gendered as well. In indigenous cultures, they believe that all living beings were imbued with a degree of life force that animated them and how they lived. That would include animals, that would include plants, that would include stars and bodies, that anything that has the capacity to move is imbued with a degree of life essence. So I like to think of the oversoul as a great ocean, right? So we say that this metaphysical substance of the soul, or rather of the oversoul, is like an ocean. And then each individual human being has a drop of this ocean within them, creating their own individuated personality of how they animate themselves. So my degree of life force and life essence is just a drop in this bucket of the great oversoul. And from this great ocean produces all animals, all animal life, all human life, all plant life, all humans that have ever existed, all humans that do exist, and all humans that will exist contain and come from the Oversoul. Now, Ralph Waldo Emerson didn't say this, I'm saying this, but I believe that consciousness works the exact same way. That you would say that God, intelligent design, the creator, has a degree of infinite consciousness, that God is aware of the past, the present, and the future, that God exists and permeates all of, that whole timetable, that whole space time, right? And consciousness, that droplet of consciousness that I have to be able to perceive the world in the way that I do, is a small degree of this consciousness of God, of this infinite consciousness. The same like drop in a water bucket. This is also how it connects to archetypes, right? Because as we learned about archetypes from the power of archetypes, in the video that we had discussed previously, we talked about how archetypes, they emerge from the unconscious and are ultimately reflected in our souls. So you could ultimately say that the oversoul is the container for all archetypes. That the parent archetype would be the mother-child archetype, right? And the oversoul is the mother soul, right? That contains and gives life to all archetypes that permeate this sacred field of life and how we understand it. The Oversoul is what contains all the archetypes that are infinitely possible. If the soul is a story of the way one lived and our soul will return back to the Oversoul, then you would say that God knows the story of every being that ever existed, every being that does exist, and every being that will exist. Reminder that your soul is a part of you that grows with you, that it contains your narrative identity, it also contains your archetype, it animates your archetype and how you understand it, and that you are an infinite manifestation of the way in which life can come into existence. And as a natalist, this is why I believe that natality is really important and how it helps us to understand ourselves as people. Because if this is how I'm socially constructed as a gender nuanced man, then it begs the question, um, what story is God telling through you as a person? Why would God then create you the way that you're created with the features that you ultimately have as a gender nuanced person? Another way that I like to think of the Oversoul is we think about the book of Revelations and how there was the beast that had many faces. It had the face of a lion, the face of a man, the face of an ox, and the face of an eagle. That I think that is how the Oversoul is, that God, the Creator, has many faces, and these faces represent the various different archetypes of how God is able to interact with us. So, I also like to say that God has a masculine and a feminine side, right? So God has a masculine face where he shows up for men as a man, as Father God. But I also believe that God has a feminine face, right? Where he shows up as the angel that sends comfort and reassurance and support and encouragement. So I don't necessarily think that the concept of the oversoul diminishes or changes God in any sort of way. I think it just helps us to understand, or rather expand our consciousness of how God works and how we then work, as human beings and how we're ultimately socially constructed. So remember that in this sacred field of life that you are designed to grow and that you grow from the inside out, like in the tree archetype. You grow from the inside out, and it is the feminine that promotes growth. And the more you become aware of who you are as a person and the story of your soul, your narrative identity, the more you come to understand how God then moves through you.